Good morning. Wonderful to be with you this morning as we continue this series on the Beatitudes, really on the Sermon on the Mount, and as we've kind of continued beyond the Beatitudes into Jesus' teaching in this kind of great three-chapter exposition on God's will for our lives. I'd like us to begin by reading through the text for today. We'll be moving through it from verse to verse in the displays as we go through it, but I'd like to just read through the whole of it once. This is a strong text. It's a text that I think speaks to us all and speaks to our culture, the world we live in. So I'd like us to look at the whole of it, and then we'll begin kind of diagnosing it as we go through. If you have your Bibles, you can open them to chapter 5 of Matthew, beginning at verse 21. We're 21 verses into the sermon. You have heard that it was said to those of old, "You shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment." But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. And whoever says, "You fool," will be liable to the hell of fire. So if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge and the judge to the guard, and you be put in prison. Truly I say to you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. You've heard that it was said, "You shall not commit adultery." But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body go into hell. The Gospel of our Lord. In this series on the Sermon on the Mount, I think in part because you have various speakers, myself included, we haven't exactly been moving through it in chronological order. This text today is very early in the Sermon on the Mount. In fact, it immediately precedes what Pastor Craig preached on last week, and before that, the Sermon on the Mount, which I preached on a good month ago. So we've been kind of out of order, so I thought it might be helpful to just get a sense of the direction of the Sermon on the Mount and where we are in Jesus' intent in this teaching. Again, Jesus is coming on this mount to teach, and it was very much in the way and in the fashion that the Israelites, that those who gathered around Jesus would have recognized Moses came to them. It's a very Mosaic, not in a mosaic in a picture put together, but Mosaic as in Moses sort of imagery that Jesus is evoking there. And he begins by really talking to us about the way in which God has come to us as a deliverer, in just the same way Moses did, right? And so that comes to us in the Beatitudes, where we hear that God's promise and his presence are with those in need to deliver. And immediately following that initiation into God's grace, into God's care for us, we have the texts that talk about we're to be salt and we're to be light. Right? We're the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Let your light so shine before others. These wonderful texts. And so Jesus is saying God has come into your life to redeem you, to save you. He sees you. He promises to you. You are to be then chosen to be his light, to reflect him, to show him to the world. That is your purpose. And then immediately we move to where last Sunday's text was, and that is where Jesus says, I have come not to abolish the law, to fulfill the law. Right? Every dot is going to be taken care of here of the law. Right? I'm calling you to a righteousness that exceeded that of the Pharisees. And so in saying that, he then begins the text that we're going to start today. We are beginning 2 of 6 different statements that Jesus makes, all in very parallel fashion. Each one is, you've heard it say, but I say. Right? You've heard it said this, but I say to you. Now, when he says that, it isn't that he's discounting what you've heard to say. It isn't that, well, you heard this, but I'm telling you something completely different. No, in fact, when he says you've heard it said, he uses something called the divine passive. And that's a tense in Greek that insinuates that God is the one that said these things. And so Jesus isn't discounting them. Jesus is instead lifting them up, but he's expanding them, he's deepening them, he's broadening them. Right? And so he goes into this entire series that we're going to go, and he invites us to consider these commandments as a matter not of just what we do here and there, not a matter of legislative policy, but a matter of the heart. See, he doesn't just want us to act like the light, he wants us to be the light. He doesn't want us to act like salt, he wants us to be salt. This is about identity, and this is about what motivates us. And he's filling in all the spaces around the law with his intent and with his love and with his wisdom. And so that's the point of his teaching. And so it begins. The first 2 we're going to cover of these, you've heard it said, but I say to you. And it begins this way. You've heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. Now, you might think this is an interesting picture to connect to this commandment and Jesus lifting up the commandment. But there are 2 reasons why I chose this image for this text. The first is because the propensity we have to view someone else in such a manner as to dehumanize them to the degree to which they might be killed is the degree to which we fail to see them as the child God made them to be. Right? Murder is only possible when someone looks upon someone else and sees them as less than worthy of life. But the more we see each other as God's children with potential, with value, with divine worth, the more we see the other as our brother and sister, the more we will seek life for them. I was just thinking, as we were introduced to this being the start of Advent, and as the reading was talked about the infant Jesus coming to us, you know, how Jesus came to us as this child, right? And Martin Luther said that part of the gift of Jesus coming as this child was that who can reject a child? Right? He comes to us in such a way that immediately our heart goes out to care and to receive this child. And so it is that if we looked at everybody the way God created them to be, first as a child, we would be less likely to bring harm to one another. The second reason is this picture of the child lifts up to me the degree to which we need this commandment, and the degree to which we as a culture, we as a world, have forsaken God's invitation for us to protect life, to not murder. And that is because of the way in which abortion so predominates our life together. Abortion stands as a radical example of the way in which, instead of promoting life, our culture accepts and even promotes death. To even children, to even infants, before they've had the chance to grow and to live. Furthermore, it's interesting to note that the idea of abortion also relates to the second commandment that Jesus is going to lift up about adultery. Right? Because tragically, in most cases, it's around adulterous sort of behavior that children who are, quote, unwanted are created and then dismissed and killed. And so this image is one that affects us in more than one way. And we as a culture have committed such travesty to God in the abundance of the abortions that are committed. I'm grateful to this congregation. I know that you have strong ties to the Pregnancy Resource Clinic and have for a long time been involved. Jenny, who helps lead that group in their ministries. And so it's a wonderful witness. And she could probably give you a lot better, more accurate, complete statistics. But I did a little Googling for the sake of this sermon. And just want to share with you some numbers so that you get a sense of the pervasiveness of this issue. In 2022, the rate of legal abortions in the United States was 19.9 per 100. That's 1 in every 5, basically, per 100 births. The World Health Organization, I couldn't believe this number, but the World Health Organization says that on average, 73 million induced abortions occur per year. 73 million. That's across the world. And that the average across the world is 3 out of 10 lives are eliminated. In the U.S., we amount to about 1 million of those abortions per year. And just to give you a sense, because of course Jesus here is talking about all sorts of murder, all sorts of ways we take life, and one of those ways is in violent deaths, gun deaths. In the U.S., there are 47,000 gun deaths. I don't know, forget what year this was, maybe 23, I think. And that means that abortions have a ratio from gun deaths of 1 to 20. So for every gun death there are 20 abortions. We are a culture who not only tolerate death, but worships death. Death is everywhere. You think about the entertainment that is frequently before us and how often that entertainment depicts death, violent death. Right? And part of what that does to our psyche is it conditions us to start to lack empathy for victims, conditions us to accept death, to even celebrate it. Those kind of images should be hard and painful for us to consume, not a part of where we seek pleasure. You can look to the violence in our streets and on our schools and among nations, and death is everywhere. Wars and genocides and terrorism. Now, true enough, this story of violence to one another is as old as the history of human beings. But there's a degree to which, in modernity, we are able to perform death at such an institutional and technological level that it's nearly unfathomable. Right? We have enough weapons to destroy all life on earth. Talk about a culture that promotes death. We are in that sort of culture. There are, of course, other more subtle ways in which death is dealt among us. The drugs on our streets, or the drugs put into the foods on our shelves that have been promoted as healthy, and we keep finding more and more of them aren't. There's something gravely insidious and evil that a respect for human life doesn't convict all of those who are trying to provide food and healing, and allows them to put in things that slowly poison us. Jesus continues beyond just murder and tries to address some of those things that move us toward death, and particularly addresses here anger. Other things he will address later in the Sermon on the Mount, but here he addresses anger. He says, But I say to you, that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says you fool will be liable to the hell of fire. Jesus wants to stop murder, but here he equates murder with activity that we would not equate to the horrible stuff I just talked about. Calling someone a name, he equates to murder and to judgment. What is Jesus doing here? Part of what he's doing is trying to stop those places that lead us to places where such disrespect for life occurs. And at the heart of it, Jesus here is addressing the anger that sometimes overcomes us. Consider the first murder. The picture that is depicted here is of Cain and of Abel. Right? And Cain becomes angry with his brother Abel and is warned by God. He's warned by God about this anger. God says to him, this is in the beginning of Genesis, "Why are you angry?" And then continues to say about that anger, "Sin is crouching at your door, Cain. Its desire is for you, and you must rule over it." See, God warns him that this anger is trying to claim you. It's trying to take you over. And anger has that capacity for us. We start seeing red, right, is the expression. I just saw red and I couldn't control myself. Next thing I said this, next thing I said that. Tragically, Cain ignores God's advice, as we frequently ignore Jesus's in this matter. Cain goes and speaks to Abel, his brother. We're not told what that conversation was like, but one imagines it was more along the lines of "you a fool" or worse, because the next line tells us that when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Now, anger may not always lead to literal murder, although sometimes it does, and it certainly enables it. But anger almost always deals some sort of death, not life. Think about your own behavior. I bet you find it hard to locate those places in your life where you spoke or did something in anger that you don't regret at least part of what you spoke or did. You may have had good reason to feel like some wrong was done, but if you've spoken it while you're angry, it's typically not healing and life that's produced. It's often more pain and more sin and more anger. There's a lot of collateral damage to our anger. It's like these weapons that we've developed. They're not pinpointed. There's a lot of collateral damage, a lot of unintended consequences. Jesus tells us to put aside our anger. He warns us that the words that we speak that emanate from anger or those words that evoke anger should be silenced. We're to speak words that promote life and healing and hope. Not long ago, you went in a series of James, and James and the Sermon on the Mount have a lot of parallels, by the way. You've kind of really been hitting the discipleship train as a congregation. And in that text, James brings some wonderful images about our tongue, about the words we say. It's like a bit, and it moves us, right? And if those words are words of anger, it moves us in that direction, and it just spills out in that direction. It's like a spark that starts a fire, and all of a sudden, before you know it, the whole forest is ablaze. Jesus said, be careful of those words you say. They, in their own way, commit their own violence. They commit their own sort of murders. Now, sometimes there are hard things, and sometimes those hard things need to be spoken, but don't speak them in anger. Speak them in love and with love and through love and for love, not to release the redness in your own heart, the violence in your own heart, but instead to cure the violence in someone else's. Words are not meant to be on our lips to curse or to belittle or to mock or defame or deceive or destroy. The words in our lips, the words on the lips of those who know Christ, are to proclaim praise and offer grace, inspiration and encouragement, love, respect, truth. There will be words that promote peace. So Jesus continues, so if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother and then come and offer your gift. Let me make a little note that it's interesting that Jesus' next teaching has to do with laying aside an offering. If you remember, it may well be that Jesus was thinking about Cain and Abel as he taught this, because the source of Cain's anger for Abel was about an offering. So there's an interesting connection there. It was perhaps with that story in mind. So Jesus is here saying, if you're offering your gift to the altar and remember your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go be reconciled to your brother. Now that might not seem too shocking. There's a lot of stuff in today's text that are shocking and kind of really you might struggle with when you hear. This part you might not. But if you were one of the original hearers of this from Jesus, this would shock you as much as anything else. You know, it took me a couple of Sundays actually coming to church here to realize where the offering was. It's kind of in those back boxes in the corners a little bit. Right? It's kind of easy for us to walk by there. But for an Israelite, for a faithful Jew, the chief responsibility, the chief response they had to God's activity in their life was to worship Him, to give Him praise, and there were two pieces of that were fundamental. One was a sort of a confession of what God had done for them, right? Almost a creedal kind of thing. They would come and say, God, you've delivered us from the hand of Egypt, out of slavery into the freedom of the promised land. You've been this God that has saved and redeemed us. You've been present with us, and you've promised to us, and we are grateful. So first is to say those words, remember what God has done for us, and then the second was to be grateful and show that forth in their offering. And there's a degree to which we still recognize that, right? When we sing these songs of praise to begin the service, it's really, what are we doing? We're offering our praise to God. We're offering ourselves to God. So this idea of offering being first and foremost is within us, but for them, they'd recognize that, look, my obligation to God, to have God above all other things, my heart, soul, mind, and strength, is in my devotion to God. How do I show that it's in my offering? Jesus says here, lay aside your offering if you know someone has something against you. That's how important making peace with your brother and sister is. That was shocking. You lay aside your offering? Isn't that a first thing? Jesus says no. Of course, that isn't new. Prophets like Hosea say things like, I desire steadfast love and not sacrifice. But nevertheless, that lesson was difficult for them to come to mind. Jesus continues on that same frame, come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are still going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you be put into prison. Truly I say to you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. Now there's some generic wisdom in Jesus' teaching here, kind of a sort of strategy that says take care of things before they escalate, and that is part of Jesus' intent, take care of things before they escalate. That's we've insinuated. But Jesus is not just trying to give us a life hack here. He's trying to make kingdom hearts. Listen carefully to what he says. He said in our text that we had just read, if someone has something against you, make peace. Comes to terms with the accuser. Now notice, when we say that, what do we think? We often think that means that, if I have a disagreement with someone, I go to see them and I try and make peace. But that's not what this is. Listen carefully. If someone has something against you, you go and make peace. You might have not done anything. It might be a misunderstanding, but they have something against you, you go and make peace. Maybe you did something, but you thought it was the right thing, and they have it against you. Nevertheless, go and make peace. Right? Jesus thinks it's so important that there be peace. Now, it may be that you've wronged a person, but that is a different sort of thing, isn't it? If there's someone you've wronged, what are we to do? We're to repent, and we're to make it right. That's simple. That's scriptural. Think of Zacchaeus, right? When he came to know Christ and he realized how he defrauded so many, he's repentant of that. He gives to the poor, and he repays everyone he's defrauded twice what they owe them. And he makes it right. If you have something against someone else, what do you do? Well, that also should be clear. You offer forgiveness. You address the hardness of your own heart if you have something against someone else. And you show forth the kind of reconciliation and grace and forgiveness that Jesus does. But here Jesus is talking about someone has something against you. And here you're being called to address their heart for the sake of peace, to address them. Not to defend your position, but to come to seek to understand theirs and to come to terms with them. As we began this worship service, one of the things that everyone did was greet each other, right? Say good morning, good to see you, I haven't seen you for a while, how you doing, how's so-and-so? Did you see the game last night? Who do you think the next coach is going to be? Lots of conversations go on there, right, in those types of welcomes. But the origin of that greeting is really a much older one and a much more meaningful and powerful one. Right? The church for a long time has broken what seems to be kind of the regular pattern of worship for a time of greeting, but it wasn't just any greeting, it was sharing the peace is what they called it. Sharing the peace. Sometimes even the kiss of peace. It involved a kiss on the cheek or an embrace or a handshake. After COVID now it's just a fist bump. Right? Or just a generic greeting. The idea of that sharing of the peace was to exchange these words, peace be with you, and also with you. That was the kind of greeting, not just good morning, but peace be with you, and also with you. And there was a purpose for that the whole of the people of God, prior to bringing their gifts to the altar, their praise and the time and their talents and their treasures, prior to that, what do they recognize? They recognize peace with each other. They come together as one body, unified, forgiving, and forgiving. Next time you as a congregation share the peace, consider that in the back of your mind. I know it'll come up, the next, are we going to get out of here in time for the football game? I know that's going to come up, but think about that time as being something that's not just greeting, but establishing peace with one another. And if there's someone in here, maybe it's a family member you just had a rough day with yesterday. Or maybe it's someone on your church council that you had an argument with. Or maybe it's a neighbor that goes to church here and they keep blowing leaves into your property. I don't know whatever it is. But go first to that person and make peace. Forgive. Seek to be forgiven. It's that important. It's tantamount to murder to not do so. Jesus then moves to a second of the great commandments. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. The church, has a difficult relationship with interpersonal relationships. We too often kind of shy away from these declarations because we know that we gather as a broken people. And we don't want to afflict pain around these issues. But in doing that, we avoid them and we allow more pain to occur. The Christian proclamation is not ever that sex is bad. Church gets that rap, but that's not what the proclamation is. In fact, it's good. It's one of God's great gifts. But because it's such a great gift, because it's such a powerful gift, because it's such a holy gift, there are appropriate and right places for it to be experienced, and that is between a man and a woman in marriage. The union of a man and woman in marriage is divinely good and powerful and personal. It's good and powerful and purposeful. It's purposeful because two individuals, alike but different, join together and become one. And out of that oneness, what happens? Another is created. A symbol of that unity, a presence of that unity is made. Sex is purposeful. It creates life. It introduces into this world another child of God, that he might be further praised and worshiped and glorified. What is a more wonderful purpose in life than that? To bring forth life. It's powerful. It's powerful because it establishes a union physically, but more importantly, emotionally, even spiritually. Some church traditions talk about it as a sacramental sort of thing. That's not our tradition, but it speaks to the degree to which this is a sacred thing, a powerful thing. And it is powerful because it provides, a husband and wife joined together in faithful marriage, provide a place where the new life that is created out of that can be rightly and healthfully nurtured in the ways of Christ, nurtured to prosper. Every statistic you find shows forth that a husband and a wife, a mother and a father, provide the healthiest environment for a child to grow. God created this union to complete his image. Right? In the story of creation, there's lots of things God creates, and they're all good. But when he just creates man, it's not good. Women, you're not surprised at that, are you? It's only until the woman's created that it becomes good. Right? It's in that union that the completeness of God, who created the male and female in his image, is fully manifest. And so we as Christians are called to honor marriage, to honor spouses, to honor children. Because marriage gives life and security, physically, emotionally, again, spiritually. It's a beautiful gift, worth protecting and worth waiting for. We just passed Good Friday, right? This is Good Friday weekend, and some of you might have been out shopping. Black Friday. I said Good Friday. I'm sorry. Yeah, Black Friday. Oh, my wife and daughters love when I do these things. I say, yeah, Black Friday. So some of you maybe were out shopping, or you were getting on your PayPals or whatever they are to get get your gifts. Let me give you a hint, just so you know. If you got that special tin of chocolates for your beloved, they are not as special. They are not as special when you've dug out the middle parts to see which ones are your favorite and have already eaten those. It's worth saving. Whether you're married or not, I'd like to invite you into practice, and that is in the practice of praying for your spouse. Whether you're married or not. If you're married, that might be a little bit easier. You can name that person. You can see that person. Pray for them. And pray that you might be a better partner for them. But if you're not married, I'd invite you to do the same. Because your spouse is out there somewhere. Pray for them. Pray that God watches over them, that God protects them, that God purifies their hearts, that God prepares them for the gift that is you. And pray that you might be prepared for the gift that is them. That kind of union and that kind of love is worth it. It's beautiful. It's purposeful. It's powerful. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. My daughters helped me find this image. I guess it's popular. A lot of the young people will know it's a meme or whatever, so it gets applied to all sorts of things. But it's very clear how it would be applied to this. You know, our culture is in a sort of crisis in many ways. Kind of our sin is so prevalent. We're in a crisis because we have an inability to distinguish love and lust. Love simply might be understood as being about the other person's needs. Lust is about our needs. Love is about self-giving. Lust is about self-gratification. We can't distinguish that, it seems like, in our culture today. We've grown to a place where it's hard to distinguish friendship and sex. You know, part of it is a language problem. In English, we have one word, love, to describe all these different kind of things. In Greek, there are 4 words: philia and eros, storge, and agape. Philia, you can think of Philadelphia. That's easy to remember. It's the city of brotherly love. Philia is that kind of brotherly love, friendship love, sibling love. Eros, erotic, is that kind of sexual love, passion. It can be deeper than just lust, but it's certainly including that sort of sense. Storge is parental love, familiar love, right? It's the kind of love a father has for a daughter or a mother for the son or vice versa. And agape is that word that's used to describe God's love. A love that is pure. A love that is self-giving and sacrificial. The less we look at one another with eros, lustful love, as objects, and the more we get to the place where we can look at each other with agape love, the more our hearts are reflecting Christ. When I would do premarital counseling, I would, like to get to know the couple a little bit. And one generic question that I would often ask them is just simply like, well, why are you getting married? What about the other person is attracting you to them? And the usual answer I got was also slightly problematic. And the usual answer I got was something like, well, she just makes me feel so wonderful. I just feel inspired by her. I get energy from her. She makes me feel good. All this kind of stuff. And look, obviously, we want our spouse to be someone who gives us energy and makes us feel good. That's certainly accurate and important. But it's also kind of selfish. It was often about all the things I get. All the things I get. How much did Jesus' love on the cross get him? His focus wasn't like, hey, these people are just so good to me. Makes me feel so good. Right? Different sorts of love here. And the more beautiful love is God's love. Look, the love between a young bride and the groom, it's a beautiful picture. But I tell you where that picture becomes particularly just life-changing. It's the man who, day after day, takes his wife who's been encumbered with a stroke and lifts her out of bed every morning into her chair and dresses her and clothes her and prepares food and crushes it and feeds it to her. I mean, that kind of love is so much more profound and deep than the kind of romantic pictures, for as broad and wonderful as they are, as the East is from the West. as we talk about looking lustfully, we need to mention one other thing, because I think it's further reflective in just the pervasiveness of our culture's lack of recognizing the holiness of the relationships that we're called into, and that is the power and perversion of pornography. Pornography is a huge problem today. I mean, it's always been a problem, again, from time began. But there's a degree to which today it is so pervasive and so intentionally predatory that you can't avoid it. It will seek you out and will seek out your children. It is everywhere and it is available. And it will seek out the hearts of our children. And pornography is incredibly corrupting. It's terribly addictive. Some studies show that pornography creates the same kind of dopamine dependency as addictions like crack cocaine. That's how much it becomes a part of a person's life. And it can destroy lives. And I've seen it destroy lives, a lot like crack cocaine or alcohol or those kind of substance abuses in terms of relationships that it destroys. It's terribly damaging to our perspectives in relationships. It's damaging psychologically. It's damaging in the way in which people come to socialize or be capable of socializing. It dehumanizes others, and it dehumanizes those who participate in it. And it leads to sort of perversions that just continue to grow and stretch, because it doesn't just stay confined in a box. It always wants more and it always wants more. And it leads to those death-dealing activities of things like human trafficking, which is at an incredible rise that it's hard to fathom, sexual violence, sexually transmitted diseases, unwanted pregnancies, which lead to abortion. It's powerful. And Satan wants it to prosper, because he doesn't want our heart to reflect the pure, self-giving love of God. He wants it to reflect that sort of distortion and brokenness and sin. Jesus speaks these words, and boy, if something is going to shock us to recognize the significance of how we're directing our lives, these should. Jesus says, "If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away, for it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away, for it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body go into hell." I talk about this text as the Weebles text. To some of you might remember that children's toy, Weebles. The younger people here will not remember that. But when I was young, I had a little sister, and I can remember being thrilled to get her a house that had Weebles in it. Weebles were basically, you see them up there. They were caricatures made in the shape of an egg with a flat bottom and a weighted bottom. Really was what it was, a weighted bottom. And so the idea was, when you're just a little infant, they would not be falling over. They'd always pop up, and they'd kind of weeble around there, wobble around. Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down, was the saying. I call this the Weebles text because if we listen to it in terms of what it says, we'd all be Weebles. No arms and legs anymore to stand on. We'd just be kind of little stumps there. Right? This text is so extreme that our initial kind of direction is to just recognize it as hyperbole. It has to be hyperbole. A lot like sayings that we might say. Right? My wife and daughters occasionally like to watch some kind of romantic series on TV, and I might say such to them, I'm going to pluck my eyes out if I have to watch this again. Right? They might say that to some of my wrestling watching, right? It's just too much. right? You might say, I would cut my arm off if I could get that opportunity again. Right? Do we mean those things? I'm not going to gouge my eyes. I'll probably sit down and watch it with them. And I certainly don't wish to cut off my arm for this sake. That this must just be an exaggeration to get our point, to get Jesus' point. Jesus is trying to exaggerate to get us to wake up and see this stuff is important. But I'm going to suggest to you that, one, Jesus is not telling us to cut off our arms and pluck out our eyes. That much is true. But that it is also not an exaggeration or hyperbole. Why would I say those two things held together? Because the key of this passage is the word if. If your right eye causes you to sin, or if your right hand causes you to sin. Is it your right eye that causes you to sin? Is it your right hand that causes you to sin? These are instruments by which you might sin. They're a part of the process of your sinning, but they're not the cause of your sin. If you plucked out your eye, your right one, and then decided to pluck out your left one, are you going to be less capable of lusting? If you chop off your right hand and then chop off your left hand, are you going to be less capable of being angry? I would propose to you, I'm going to be a lot more angry if I don't have either of my arms. Right? Be a lot more violence in my heart in those cases. They don't cause the sin, nor are they the answer to sin. Furthermore, if I pluck out my eye, I no longer, might see someone in a way that objectifies them, but I'm also not going to see them in a way that sees them as a child of God and goes to their aid when they need help. And if I cut off my hands, maybe my hand will no longer hurt and hit, but it also will no longer heal and help. Right? The problem isn't our eyes and our hands. The problem is our hearts. It's a matter of our hearts. Think about it. Jesus equates things like murder, the act of murder, and the act of committing adultery to what? Matters of the heart. Anger, lust. This is the problem, Jesus is saying. If we could do that and so simply solve this, it'd be worth it. But it won't solve any of those problems. This does bring forth some questions. It's not going to help you to pluck out your eye or cut off your arm or your hand, but there are perhaps some things that you need to cut out of your lives, things that help influence you to sin. That's a significant process that you need to discern. What do I have surrounding me that leads me into this pattern? And some of those things, if they are leading you into those patterns of sin, transforming your heart away from God, not toward God, they should be eliminated from your life. And that will not be easy. It is not easy to fix the damage done to our hearts. Change is hard. Sin sinks deeply into us. It is addictive, medically, chemically, spiritually addictive. The devil does not want to let you go. It will take will and discipline, but it takes more than that. It takes support. It takes support from brothers and sisters who have journeyed the same road and can be helpers to you in that process. Ultimately, it takes God to have the inspiration and power to do it. You see, it's Jesus who is the great physician. And it is only Jesus whose word pierces the heart and changes who we are. Out of our hearts come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false witness, slander, we're told later in the Gospel of Matthew. And so Jesus enters our hearts in the Spirit, putting to death the old, that we might be born anew in Him. The answer to our heart's affliction is the great physician, Jesus Christ, who specializes in heart surgery, who's come to fulfill that prophecy long ago, that these words would be written on our hearts, that we'd be made alive, that the Spirit would find its place within us. And so seek Christ to do heart surgery on you. We all need it. None of us in this place could claim to be immune from anger or lust ever encountering us. Seek Christ. Move in prayer. The text that I have in front of you is from Psalm 51, a favorite prayer of mine. Create in me a clean heart, O God, renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from your presence, and take not your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and uphold me with your free spirit. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. You know who first offered this prayer, who it's attributed to? It comes from the Psalms. It would be David, that shepherd who became king. David, who in his life literally committed murder and adultery. And he seeks the Lord to create in him a clean heart. And he does. For David and for you. That's why Christ has come.